Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. We're back on McMullen and McDonald. We had a third voice and an insightful one at that from Bleeding Green Nation and co-host of the Eye on the Enemy Eagles podcast. John Stolnis jumps in with us here on Birds 365. Johnny S., haven't talked to you since the draft. We need your take on this because we've gotten it from basically everybody else we've had on the show.
Yeah.
How did Howie Roseman get smarter than every other person in the National Football League?
I don't know, man. He really does seem to have he does seem to be one step ahead of everybody else at this stage of the game. And, there was a fair amount of skill. This was all put into place a couple of years ago with the Carson Wentz trade. They, started to accumulate picks that way. The Saints trade that he made last year was really what kind of catapulted them this year. No team that goes to the Super Bowl should pick in the top 10 of the draft. I mean, that's not the way the league works, but getting that number 10 pick allowed them to move up, and he got some luck too. I mean, sometimes the board falls your way. Teams in front of you make decisions that benefit you as it's getting closer. I certainly think that there was a very high degree of likelihood that Jalen Carter would have got taken number 5 by the Seahawks. They went in a different direction. The Texans jump in and, they get up to number 3, which kind of moves some other pieces around. And so you have a little bit of a mixture of luck and you have a little mixture of skill. And Howie Roseman, no matter what you can say about him, and really everybody's singing his praises. I know other NFL GMs are sick and tired of everybody praising Howie Roseman, and that's just a shame. Too bad, so sad. But you got to give him his props. He just seems to have a good handle, and I think you got to credit the other guys in the organization who he works with. He doesn't do it alone, and the process that they have. They've really honed it over these last few years to a point where I think that no matter how these players turn out, the process was very good in these last few drafts, especially this last one.
Yeah, that's what I always say, John. The decision-making makes sense. That process makes sense, typically with the Eagles. Not everything's going to work out. You can make a good decision, get a bad outcome, but the more good decisions you make, the better chance you have to have a good outcome. I think that bears out over the larger sample size. But you mentioned that it was Peter Schrager said it on the NFL Network that, bunch of GMs around this league are getting tired of Howie getting his flowers from everybody in the media. But they're deserved. And so I'm trying to boil it down to the essence of it. And I come up with 2 things. And I come up with experience. Jody knows I love bringing up because Jim Schwartz, startup cost. Same with players. Rookie players, they have those same thing with rookie GMs. They've never done it before. They make mistakes. And guess what? They get fired before they can correct the mistakes when they make mistakes. So that's the second part of it, John. Jeffrey Lurie, the long leash. Howie Roseman can do things that other GMs can't do. So if I had to give you a percentage, chop it up. Experience, Jeffrey Lurie, that long leash. Why would you say Howie would have? What's a bigger part of that advantage Howie has over other GMs?
That's a really good question. I would probably put it at 60% experience, 40% long leash from Jeffrey Lurie, because having that long leash allows you to take chances. It allows you to kind of, there are teams that passed on Jalen Carter for a very good reason. And it could blow up in the Eagles' faces. There is a chance that could happen. All of the picks that the Eagles made here, they're not locks. They all could go awry. But I think Howie Roseman knows that he has more of an ability to take a chance, to take a risk on certain guys than other GMs do, because they're year to year. And Howie Roseman has won the Super Bowl. He's gotten the team back to another Super Bowl. I think he has convinced Jeffrey Lurie and the fan base that he knows how to put a Super Bowl team together. He's done it twice now, and now he's trying to keep this team together. So that leash really helps. But I also think that Howie Roseman has learned from his experience. And that's the thing. You can have guys with a lot of experience, and sometimes they get locked into the way they used to do things, or they get locked into past patterns of behavior. Howie Roseman, I don't think does that. I think he's learned from past mistakes. I think he learned from the Jalen Reagor pick that it's not a wise idea to pass up on a superior football player for a guy you think might be a better scheme fit for that particular next year and year after. I think he's not fallen victim to the sunk cost fallacy where you're paying a guy a ton of money and then you feel like you have to hang on to him because you've committed so much financially to him. That takes a level of maturity that I think he gained from when he got demoted, when Chip Kelly was around. And so that's the most encouraging thing to me is I see a general manager who has learned from mistakes and who is not outthinking himself. He's not doing a galaxy brain thing. He's making the smart moves that I think most of us would make, but they all make sense, and he's being universally praised for it.
I'm going to need you to project on the Eagles' second first-round draft pick, Nolan Smith, because I haven't even figured out my own position on the young man, because I was not a fan of drafting him at 10. Mm-hmm. Not that he isn't a very good player, not that he wasn't arguably one of the 10 most talented players. I just didn't know if he was a perfect fit with the Eagles, and if you're going to be drafting a guy at number 10, he better be a perfect fit, because he's very similar to Hassan Reddick, the way they play the game, their size, how they would fit into a scheme defense. But when you get the 10th best player at number 30, you don't say no. You say, please give me the card so I could turn it in.
Yeah.
But he's still that same player that is very similar to Hassan Reddick. If he's Hassan Reddick's backup, and when you get Hassan off the field, you put him in and don't lose anything.
Right.
Is he a fit? Does he work with what the Eagles want to do? I don't know how you can't say it's a great draft pick when you get that kind of talent at that spot in the draft, but is he going to be a seamless fit into the Eagles defense?
Right. Again, you're talking about, if you're looking at the process, it was a no-brainer pick there at number 30, no doubt about it. As far as how he works in on this rotation here in 2023, I think for an undersized guy, he does play the run better than you would expect. And so I don't think you necessarily have to pull him off the field in running situations, although he's not going to be used that way here in 2023. You still have Brandon Graham who can be that guy on the other side, and he'll be a passing down guy. But I think as many guys as you can have that can get to the quarterback, they'll figure it out. I have all the confidence in the world Sean Desai will be able to work him in. And it sounded like they wanted to think about using him as a linebacker in certain situations. So maybe you can use him in certain blitz packages that we didn't see under Jonathan Gannon. I think having Hassan Reddick and Nolan Smith lined up on each side of the line on certain passing downs would be terrifying to offensive linemen. And to a quarterback who knows he's not going to have any time to throw the football. So I think there are certain ways that you can use him and use him a lot. I don't think this is going to be a guy who only plays like 10, 15 snaps a game. I think he's going to make a contribution. Certainly, if you need to rest Hassan Reddick a little more, you don't want him to play quite as many snaps in 2023. I think then you have a guy who's very much like that in Nolan Smith. And that's a really nice thing that you don't have to have a changeup. You can just have those guys. And we saw last year how important having depth on the defensive line was with getting to the quarterback. Everybody was fresh all game long. And as long as they're not playing on an ice rink surface, they're going to get to, it sounds like they're going to continue to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, John, they had 70 sacks last year, right?
Yeah.
And they still, I hesitate to bring up the name because, it's not Jody's favorite, but Derek Barnett tore his ACL in week 1. And they were obsessed with getting that fourth pass rusher. They tried to do it with Robert Quinn. It didn't work. They were hoping Patrick Johnson would take that step forward. Didn't work. They still, with 70 sacks, they wanted a fourth guy. They wanted to come at you in waves. They were still hoping to the very end. Maybe Robert Quinn's the guy that'll make the Brandon Graham play in the Super Bowl. Didn't work out.
Yeah.
Even if he made one play in the playoffs, it would have been worth it. Didn't work out. They were looking for it. Now they have it. And, he doesn't have to play a lot right away. Right. But when Brandon Graham eventually does leave, you got to start talking about extensions for Reddick and Sweat, who are great players. Can never have enough pass rushers. Yeah, I don't think I told you this. This was a funny story, Jody. Obviously, I didn't tell it to you, John, but I texted an NFC personnel guy after the Eagles took Carter. And I said, basically all I said was, what do you think? Eagles, Carter, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't expecting an answer because he was kind of busy. I was expecting an answer days later. I got an answer that night, not after the Carter pick, after the Smith pick. And the answer was rhymes with duck. This team with these players and that pass rush, I mean, I'm concerned about the back seven, but they're more talented than they were last year on the front. When you put Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the mix, on paper it looks frightening.
Beware those startup costs.
Oh, the startup costs exist, but they're more talented up front. It might take a while. But Jalen Carter, I mean, he's just going to be better than Javon Hargrave. If he isn't, it's because of the off the field stuff. I mean, he's so gifted. He's going to be better. Nolan Smith, there's more question marks about, but the Eagles already know how to use these undersized pass rushers. They've proven it. I got to admit, though, John, you scared me a little bit with playing him at linebacker. I don't want any part of that. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to discuss it. I think about Hassan Reddick in Arizona early in his career. I think about Micah Parsons in Dallas before they got injuries. By the way, everybody's like that. Dallas was trying to make him an off-ball linebacker until they got 2 injuries, DeMarcus Lawrence, and I forget the second one that year. But then they were like, all right, let's see if the kid can do it. He can do it. Boy. Off-ball linebacker, I'm going to red flag that.
Yeah, not my idea. That's what I think, just to be clear. I think, that was something Howie Roseman mentioned, or it was Nick Sirianni the night he was drafted. But I think, if he does that, it's like a 1-year thing, because they are hurting at linebacker right now. And like you mentioned, Derek Barnett's coming back. They do have edge rushers. So I
didn't even think of that, John. You just scared me.
Yeah, I don't want. I mean, he obviously, if you're looking at Micah Parsons as the template, you don't want him playing linebacker. The smart thing would be to go out and get a linebacker here over the next couple of months before the start of training camp. But I think it's a possibility, maybe as a temporary solution, if you're not able to upgrade the linebacker spot. But I think long term, his future is an edge rusher on the defensive line.
Yeah. I don't think any of the three of us break down game film of the Cowboys and watch every single play after the game is over and done with. We're all Eagle guys. Mm-hmm. I think Parsons still plays a little off-ball linebacker with his hand.
He did very little last year, but they already said he's a full-time edge rusher now. They just said it like this week. They just said it. They're like, finally. Now, he played very little, but he did play a little bit.
Yeah.
And now they've said, all right, he's an edge rusher.
He's a defensive end, which is smart. And I saw where Parsons said he's put on a couple extra pounds of pure muscle, that he's weighing in at 152 now. He played at 252. He played 248 last year, and he doesn't expect to ever be over 252. Now that they've gotten Nolan Smith, and when I say they, I mean the Eagles, does that mean they're not going to be in the running for Micah Parsons? Because I get this feeling that Micah Parsons wants to be an Eagle in the worst way. He's always commenting on him. He's always doing podcasts with A.J. Brown where A.J.'s dropping hints like, Micah, Philly's a great place to play, great place to live. Does this now take him out of the Micah Parsons running for when he hits free agency a couple of years from now?
It could. It depends on Nolan Smith's development, obviously. If Hassan Reddick is still playing the way he's playing and Nolan Smith emerges as a guy, it could, because he's going to demand big money. And Jalen Hurts, obviously his contract is not as damaging as we were fearing it would be in the next couple of 3 years. But there is going to be less money to go around. Now, I know this team, they do invest on the lines. And so if you're going to invest money in a free agent, Micah Parsons would be a really smart move. That'll be a nice problem to have. I think it could, depending on how Nolan Smith develops, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, when you're that good, I certainly
I kind of agree with Jody in that, he does bring up the Eagles a lot. He seems to have a lot of respect.
Oh yeah,
for the
all
Eagles.
the time.
Well, Penn State guy,
Yeah. They'll franchise him. I mean, he's that type of player that they
Mm-hmm.
won't even mess with that. Now, something could happen. He could get hurt.
Which, oh, by the way, sorry to interrupt you, John. Now that they do that, going to cost them more money because he's a defensive end. Franchise tag for a DE is a lot more than it is for a linebacker. So just remember that for 2 years from now when they try to slap the franchise tag on
all
him.
I'm saying is I don't want to get Eagles fans' hopes up. I don't think there's going to be any path.
That's just me pointing out what Micah Parsons said. It's not like I'm making this up out of left field. Micah Parsons is the one who keeps dropping hints he'd like to be an Eagle.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a lot of players that would like to be in certain situations, but they can't necessarily get there. Later in life, maybe, if you're Tom Brady, you can backdoor negotiate with everybody, but I don't think Mike is going to have that opportunity, but we shall see. And the Eagles are pretty good at edge rusher. They're probably not going to be in the market, but they're always looking at, one of the things you bring up, John, and the foundational philosophy is that addition, not only on the defensive line, offensive line. For the third consecutive year, I think Howie has said, and I wish people would pay more attention when we have these Bijan Robinson talks pre-draft. Hey, if it's even, I'm taking the lineman. He said it 3 consecutive years now. And he does it. They do not take all linebackers. I mean, I'm concerned. And it's from the point of, I agree with them in general. Devalued position, not nearly as important. I'm not asking them to take Jack Campbell at 18, but I can't go into a season with Nicholas Morrow, who has not one penny of guaranteed money. Nakobe Dean, look, I'm with everybody else. I think he's got a chance to be a really good player, but the reality is he had 36 snaps or whatever it was last year. It's all projection at this point. Mm-hmm. That's kind of scary for a Super Bowl team. And you scared me even more with the Nolan Smith talk. Now I'm scared about that. I got to buy it. I have a dog. I can't criticize my dog by saying I need to buy a dog. I'm scared by that. They can't go. No, they got to bring in a veteran linebacker. Am I wrong?
No, I think the name that everybody is mentioning right now is Patrick Queen from the Ravens. He's a guy who it looks like could be on the move. It seems like a perfect summertime trade for Howie. He's got all those picks in 2024 that he can use to go get him. He's in the last year of his deal. We know Howie loves guys in the last year of his deal. We saw him do that last year. Last season in the offseason, there were some obvious holes on defense and some obvious solutions to those holes. And Howie Roseman went about making the obvious choices to fill them, and it all worked out. It's not to say it's all going to work out again, but Patrick Queen is an established linebacker. You can fit him in under the salary cap. You can restructure his contract and sign him for a few extra years to kind of spread the money out a little bit. It's probably not going to cost you more than maybe a 4th round pick next year, 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. So I don't know exactly what the compensation would look like, but whatever it is, they can afford it. And it would make all the sense in the world to bring him aboard because then you said you don't have to squeeze Nolan Smith in at linebacker. You don't have to rely on Nicholas Morrow and his non-guaranteed contract to suddenly become a starter. And it would also take the pressure, I think, off of Nakobe Dean to have to be the guy at linebacker right now so that all the focus and attention wouldn't be on him to produce. It would lighten his load quite a bit. And so that's the move to me that makes the most sense. And I guarantee there will be other linebackers who are cut by teams as we get closer to training camp. There will be opportunities to improve in that spot. After what I saw last year, the Eagles, I know that the Eagles roster is not set yet. There's plenty of time.
Yeah, I had given the Queen thought some trade, talked about it earlier in the week here on Birds 365. Minimum you got to pay is a 3 because they can keep him and let him walk out the door, and the projection is at least a 4 in losing the free agent in a compensatory pick. So why would you give up a year of the kid's talents and skills for a 4 from somebody else just because it comes 1 year earlier? No, I think you got to give him at least a 3, and I think he's well worth it. We'll see how the linebacker shakes out. All right, John, I've asked this of several of our guests this week. Want to run it by you. Let's say Roger Goodell puts in a phone call to Jeff Lurie today and says, we're just tweaking the last couple items of the schedule for 2023, which is supposed to come out next week. You're scheduled to play the Chiefs again. We in the office think it would be pretty cool if the first game of the year is Kansas City hosting Philadelphia in a Super Bowl rematch. We could do Buffalo numbers with that, Jeff. Mahomes again. Sorry, I don't have to paint the picture for you. Everyone knows why it would be a phenomenal game. If you're Jeff Lurie, do you say, oh, yeah, give us that shot. We want to kick the season off. Let's go. Prime timers. Thank you, Roger. Or you give me a choice? Nah, we'll play Kansas City a little later in the year. Thank you, but no, Mr. Commissioner. If you're left Jeff Lurie, what's best for the organization? Would you say yes or no to opening up against the Chiefs on Thursday night?
I think what's best for the organization from Jeff Lurie's position is what's going to be best for the financial aspect of the organization. And I think starting off against the Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch in prime time opening week of the season where you are the talk of the NFL, I think that's what Jeffrey Lurie would want. I think that's what the organization would want. And I think they should jump at it if it's offered to them. And you're catching, you're starting off the season, kind of, you don't know exactly you're going to get. Same for the Chiefs. The Chiefs might, have started off seasons slow in the past and then come on late in the season. So I don't think there's a competitive advantage or disadvantage one way or the other playing the Chiefs opening week or playing them later in the season. So if the competitive advantage isn't really there, then yeah, let's start off as being the talk of the NFL in week one. The Eagles already pretty much are the talk of the NFL, no matter where it is. Let's do it. This is a marquee team. This is the marquee team in the NFC right now. Give me the Chiefs on opening week. Give me the Super Bowl rematch on opening week. I don't think you'll get a letdown from the players on opening week if you're starting off against Kansas City. I'm absolutely on board with that. I think Jeffrey Lurie would be on board with it too.
What about Black Friday? A lot of talk. I think Peter King threw it out there that Eagles-Giants, for whatever reason, might be the Black Friday game. Is there some, because you're right, the Eagles are typically a marquee team if they're even somewhat relevant because the fan base is so passionate. They get a lot of night games, a lot of special games. Reporters hate it like me. Reporters like me hate it, but it happens. And now they're good on top of it. So really good. It makes sense, but do you think there's a competitive disadvantage when you're moving around? You're playing extra Monday night games. You're playing extra Sunday night games. You're playing Friday. You're playing Thursday. You think that hurts the Eagles at all?
I think players would probably prefer to play every game on Sunday at 1:00 or every Sunday at 4:00 to get into a rhythm. So sure, I think so, but I think this team is so good. I don't think it's a big deal. I think, and nobody likes playing on Thursday. That's a horrible decision the NFL made a few years ago. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like those games are going away, but the Thursday games are just awful. And I don't know how we get rid of them. Black Friday would be only slightly better. It's obviously an extra day to rest and prepare in between games. So I would rather play on, if my options are Thursday or Black Friday, I'll take Black Friday. But obviously Saturday or Sunday is where you want to play most of the time. And if the Eagles are moving around a lot, I think that could be a problem. But, for teams like the Patriots for all those years that are playing on all kinds of different times, and the 49ers and it didn't really seem to have an impact on them moving around. And I don't know, the Eagles have played a lot of different times the last few years, and I don't think it's had a real negative impact. So the players would prefer, I think, a set schedule, but I don't necessarily think moving around Sunday night, Monday night, 4:00, 1:00 is that big a deal. The Thursday games, you want to minimize those as much as possible.
That's where having faith in your coaching staff comes into play. Because that is a different week, different prep. Make sure the players know what they've got to do to be ready for the next game. Take the extra downtime when you're playing early, and then you got something on the back end. That's all on the coaching staff, and we've got a pretty high opinion of the coaching staff, or at least the head coach here in town. The coaching staff we got to find out about because they've got a new offensive coordinator to do new defensive coordinator. I don't know if I've answered this one, John, when we've had you on. Your opinion on have the Eagles held steady? The drop-off won't be all that significant. I think they can actually be better with the two new coordinators they have in place. What's your read on the guys who are coming in to take the places of their former OC and DC?
Well, I think in Brian Johnson, you have the guy who has been amongst the most important pieces of Jalen Hurts' development, and Shane Steichen certainly is a brilliant play caller. He proved that over the last couple of years since he took over the job in the middle of the 21 season. So Brian Johnson is a play caller we still don't know about, and that's going to be a question mark, and we won't know until the season rolls around. But these guys don't all do their jobs in a vacuum. So I'm sure Brian Johnson was kind of following what Shane Steichen was doing. I'm sure understanding his rhythms a little bit as a play caller, and I'm sure there was some learning that went on with that, in addition to helping Jalen Hurts develop into the passer that he has become. So my confidence level, as much as it can be for a new coach with no play calling experience, is about as high as it can be. As far as Sean Desai goes, I think that's going to be a much more open question. How much will his defense look like Jonathan Gannon's defense? We don't want it to look a whole lot like Jonathan Gannon's defense, but we do know he is inspired by Vic Fangio. So there are going to be some aspects of that. I think there has got to be a middle ground between like an all-out blitzing defense and what we saw from Jonathan Gannon last year. And that's really what I want. I want a defensive coordinator who's flexible. I want a defensive coordinator whose game plan can adjust to the team that they're playing. I want a defensive coordinator who can utilize the advantages that you have. I don't think that Gannathan did a good enough job utilizing the advantages that he had at cornerback last year. The middle of the field was too wide open, and that's why I thought Darius Slay and James Bradbury didn't get the interception opportunities that they otherwise might. It was way too easy for teams to keep the ball in the middle of the field. I would like to see Sean Desai use those cornerbacks, try and do their best to funnel the ball to the outside to allow their cornerbacks who are elite, and we're paying them as elite players to make elite plays. I don't think they were given that opportunity as much last year as they should have.
Now, here's my concern with that, John. And, statistics are what they are. The Eagles had the number one passing defense in the NFL last season. If you use any advanced number, they were top 5. How much can poor Sean Desai improve on that? Especially losing C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Epps, and in theory, probably going to have a rookie. If I were a betting man, I'd say Sidney Brown is going to start probably next to Terrell Edmonds. Reed Blankenship sort of the safety plan there. The corners are the corners, and they've got more depth at corner. But James Bradbury had a career year, and he's had a good career, and he had a career year. Second team All-Pro. Slay was better early than late. Avante probably played the best he's ever played. Now was injured quite a bit, so if he can stay healthy, that would help. But just from a pure efficacy standpoint, I'm using that word too much today, but I apologize. How much better could it possibly get? And my concern is the expectations. Like, I get, you win the Super Bowl, but you got to get to the Super Bowl.
Right.
And that is kind of harder even than winning the game, believe it or not. So I'm concerned about poor Sean Desai coming in here with these unrealistic expectations. Is that a worthy concern?
I think so, especially because so much of your high-impact talent that you added on the draft was on the defensive side of the ball. They really made a concerted effort to focus on that area, and I think the perception is that the Eagles got a lot of star players in this draft, and that they're going to play like star players in year one, and that shouldn't be the expectation. I think you're right. We need to understand Jalen Carter is not going to be Javon Hargrave in year one. I think he will be better than Javon Hargrave very soon, because Javon Hargrave is getting older and Carter's just starting his career. But in 2023, I would bet all the money that I've got on Hargrave being a more productive player than Carter here in 2023. And again, we don't know. So I do think you're right. I think there are maybe some unrealistic expectations on Sean Desai's defense, but I do think they also are still loaded on the defensive line. I think the sack numbers are not going to reach 70, but they still should be among the league leaders in sacks. They still should be a top 3 team in terms of total sacks this year. And I think they could, in the second half of the season, we saw the turnovers kind of disappear. And we know turnovers are kind of luck based and they fluctuate wildly. I think they could get more out of the cornerbacks than they got last season. So I think the defensive line will continue to pressure the quarterback, and that can still create opportunities. I don't know how much Jonathan Gannon had to do with those defensive linemen getting pressure last year. He wasn't a guy who did a lot of stunts. He didn't do a lot of creative things on the defensive front. He basically just told those guys to go get the quarterback, and they largely did. So I think that's a fair thing. I think worrying about Sean Desai and overvaluing what he has and all that is legit. But I still think we should have the expectation that this will be a good defense this year.
If easier equals success, I'll take easier every day of the week. So I got no problems with how Jonathan Gannon designed those 70 sacks. They got him. That's all I care about.
Sure.
But speaking of the former Eagle defensive coordinator, let me revisit this with you one time. I'll play Roger Goodell. You play Jeff Lurie. Okay, John?
All right. Do I get his money?
Yeah, you do. Whatever
Awesome.
you need to make this scenario work in your head.
Julian, you got to get rid of Julian, John.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do my best.
If you can send Julian on a Howie Roseman during the Chip Kelly era vacation, you got the spot. Jeff, it's Raj. How are you, buddy?
I'm great, bud.
Good. I know we talked about that whole Kansas City opening game thing, and you said you'd sign on for it. Thank you very much for that, by the way. But we're thinking about going in a potential other direction for KC the first week. So I may or may not hold you to accepting playing the Chiefs in week 1. So I feel badly because I kind of offered. Now I'm pulling it off the table. Let me throw you a different scenario. How would you like to open up at home rather than on the road? And we'll send the Arizona Cardinals into your place. And they might not have Kyler Murray, so you could be facing David Blau week 1, or at worst, Colt McCoy week 1. And your fans can acknowledge Jonathan Gannon when he makes his quasi-triumphant return to your ball. Would you prefer that, Jeffrey? If you tell me I offered you the Chiefs and you want the Chiefs and bang the desk, you got the Chiefs. But I'm giving you a different scenario. Would you like to play Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals week 1?
All right. See, now you're asking me to be Jeff Lurie. And if I'm Jeff Lurie, I'm probably saying I would rather play the Chiefs week 1. Because of the financial aspect of it. I think, he wants to own the team, and it's in a marquee, like you're going to be the highlight of week 1. I think Jeffrey Lurie would want that, because I don't know. I mean, we've heard the reports about how upset people are inside the Eagles with how things shook down with Jonathan Gannon, but that's a guy they wanted to keep at the end of the season.
Did everyone forget that, by the way?
I mean, it's crazy. So I don't know that Jeffrey Lurie has the same animosity towards Jonathan Gannon that the rest of us do. As a fan, would I love to get Jonathan Gannon in Philadelphia on week 1 with a weak quarterback? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Get the season started off right with the boo parade. I think that would be beautiful. Yeah. If I'm Jeffrey Lurie, I think I'm sticking with the Chiefs week 1.
Good answer.
Yeah. Don't even get me started with that story, John. There's so many holes in it. It doesn't make sense. The Vic Fangio part is the most amazing part of it, but the calendar doesn't match up. But Adam Schefter says it. Hey, Adam's great. Tremendous. Nobody's better. But I'm not afraid to say it. He got that one wrong. That's bullshit. All you got to do is look at the calendar. Vic Fangio agreed to be the defensive coordinator in Miami on January 29th. If that date is familiar to Eagles fans, because that was the date of the NFC Championship game, long before any of the tampering started, which basically was Amani Ossenford didn't understand. Oh, you can have a second interview. Shane Steichen interviewed after the NFC Championship game, but that was allowed because that was the second interview. It was the first for Jonathan Gannon. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll end it here with you at John Stolnis. Bleeding Green Nation does a tremendous job there. Phillies, They're going to get it going.
Not a
They're
good
going to.
LA
I still
weekend,
think they're
no.
going to. I still think they're going to out talent people. Long season,
Yeah.
so we'll get that sneak in for the Phillies. The good bite. But for the Eagles, I wanted a quarterback. It's not important, but I think it was a little surprising because, the Eagles went out and got Marcus Mariota to be the backup quarterback. And I think a lot of people, rightfully so, brought up, well, he could at least sort of replicate what Jalen Hurts does. He can't do it as well, but he can sort of replicate the RPOs, the zone reads. Ian Book can do it as well, at least at a much lower level. Did it in college. The guy they drafted, 6'6", statuesque pocket quarterback, Tanner McKee. What is going on there? Why Tanner McKee?
It's an interesting question. I think they drafted him to see if they could develop him into something to then move him at some point. I don't think this doesn't feel like a guy that they drafted with the thought that he will really play meaningful snaps for the Eagles. So maybe you get him in some of these preseason games where none of the starters play anyway. And he's looking, he has a couple of second halves over the next couple of years in these preseason games where he looks really, really good. I know Brandon Lee Gouton with Bleeding Green Nation. I was talking to him the other day and he says, the tape on this guy actually looks like he can throw the football quite a little bit. And so
he can spin it.
Yeah.
Yes, so he can. So there's
long term, John.
There,
but he's not going to play this year. But Marcus is only going to be here for a year in theory. Mm-hmm. You need a backup next year. 2024. He could be the backup by 2024 or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's a late round pick. Brock Purdy did it, so you can't say because he's a late round quarterback that he can't be a productive NFL player and he can't be a backup or even a good starter. So I won't poo-poo that. And we also kind of have to see how this new Eagles coaching staff, how it all breaks down, how the new quarterbacks coach is going to work with guys. And it is a different skill set. I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that you have a quarterback with a different skill set than your starter. If your starter is going to be out for a while and you have the pieces around that quarterback to actually play a different style, if your coaching staff can call a different style of play, I think this Eagles offensive line is good enough to do more traditional pass blocking and run blocking, but it would be different. So I think this is more about the future. And I think if you're thinking about, well, who would the backup quarterback be next year? You go out and you sign a Marcus Mariota-like guy again next year, or you use next year's draft to maybe go get a guy in the 4th or 5th round when you've got more picks and maybe you can feel a little bit more free to spend one on a quarterback earlier.
Let us not forget that in 2020, when Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts, they had the unstoppable Nate Sudfeld. And they said, no, we'll go get ourselves
another 6'6" guy, by the way, Nate Sudfeld.
Yeah.
Nate could move a little bit better than the quarterback they drafted yesterday, but we're not even going to argue that. All right, last thing for me, John. John and I talked about this in our first segment, little crystal ball stuff for you.
All right.
When the season is over and done with, factoring in whatever missed time due to injury you feel you must for either of the two players, who's going to have more carries at the end of the year, Rashad Penny or DeAndre Swift?
I think it will probably, that's a good question. I think probably Rashad Penny, just because I think Swift is a better pass catching receiver as a running back. So I think Penny will get more straight up rushing attempts. Overall touches, I think Swift might finish with more overall touches because I think he's going to do more for you out of the passing game. Swift is one of those kind of boomer bust guys in a lot of ways, like Miles Sanders, but he can break some big runs for you. But I think that Swift gives you that element as a receiver out of the backfield that on screen passes and stuff like that I don't think Penny necessarily does. And I think Penny has proven to be a more consistent runner on the ground when he's healthy. So I think in running plays, I think Penny will get more carries. I think Swift will finish the year with more touches overall, if that makes sense.
Always a pleasure, my friend. John Stolnis, read him at Bleeding Green Nation. Check out his Eye on the Enemy football podcast or his Good Fight Baseball podcast. Hit and see. Always a pleasure whenever we get you on. And damn, you look good compared to the two of us. We gotta stop getting these young guys on the show. They actually
It's the
look
filter on the camera. That's all. It's just the filter. Yeah.
You got a dog at the house? We had Kemsky on yesterday. He introduced us to his dog. You got a dog?
I do, but he's downstairs sleeping, so I'll bring him up next time.
Mandatory attendance from your dog next time.
Sounds
Johnny,
good.
always great. Thanks for coming on, brother. We'll touch base
Thanks,
in a
John.
couple of weeks.
Thanks, guys.
John Stolnis, Bleeding Green Nation, here with us on Birds 365. Yeah, we can make it dog week. Your dog around, or is your dog upstairs?
She's sleeping too.
Okay.
I like it when she sleeps through the show. Sometimes she wakes up a little too early, and she does not want to wait to go out.
Yeah, my dog came down yesterday. She never comes down when the show is on. I guess I forgot to close the door. She came down and said, "Yeah, you're being a bad dad here, buddy. You got to get me out."
Yeah.
We try and keep our dogs in check, but sometimes they just intimate themselves into the show. All right, we've still got an hour of show to do. He's McMullen, I'm McDonald. Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible, coming up in 20.